This is Chris McKaylee with another in the series of Glossary of Common California Government Terms. These are the letters C and D. Cabinet unit is a group of individuals who work in the governor's cabinet unit as the liaison to the executive branch agencies. Calendar is a term used to describe the agenda for a committee or floor session, such as what's on calendar today. A calendar day is every day of the calendar year, including weekends and holidays. Call of the House. This refers to when absent members are called to the floor of the Assembly or Senate, usually in order to establish a quorum. Capital outlay. Generally, these are state expenditures to acquire or construct real property. Carryover bill is another term for a 2-year bill, one introduced in the first year of the legislation and carried over to the second year. Caucus refers to a group of legislators, for example, the Democratic or Republican caucuses, or a private meeting of a political party is also called a caucus. Caucus chair is the individual legislator who is selected by the leader of each party in both houses to lead the members of their respective caucus. CCR is the California Code of Regulations, which contains all of California's adopted regulations. Censure is an official reprimand by a legislative body of one of its own members. Chair, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair. This is the appointed leader of a legislative committee. Chamber refers to either the Assembly chamber or the Senate chamber. Chaptered bill. This is the version of the bill in its final chaptered form after approval by the governor. Chapter number is the number assigned by the Secretary of State and governor to an enacted bill. Chapter out is a phenomenon when a law's provisions override any conflicting provisions in existing law, thereby chaptering out the earlier law. A charter law city is a type of city that's governed by the voter-approved charter rather than state law. A check-in session, these are non-floor session days when legislators do not meet in formal legislative sessions. Chief clerk is the top legislative staff member of the state assembly. The chief sergeant at arms is the top sergeant in the assembly and senate, who are elected officers of their respective houses of the California state legislature. Civil penalty, when a law is violated, there may be a civil or a financial penalty assessed for that violation. A cleanup bill cleans up changes to a law following enactment of a prior bill that needs to be modified or corrected, therefore cleaned up. Clerk is a term referring to the chief clerk of the assembly. Closed session or executive session occurs when specified conditions when a committee meets in private without members of the public present. Co-author, a legislator may add his or her name in support of a legislative measure by co-authoring the measure. Code, California's over 155,000 statutes are contained in a series of 29 codes, which begin with business and professions and end with welfare and institutions code. A code maintenance bill is a bill used to update technical changes to California's codes. A codified statute is an enacted bill that adds, amends, or repeals a statute in one of California's 29 codes. COLA is a cost of living adjustment, most likely occurs with ongoing payments to reflect an increase in inflation. Commission on State Mandates, the official entity that hears and determines petitions from local agencies and school districts whether they should be reimbursed for the cost of a state-mandated local program. Committees, the Assembly currently has 33 standing committees, while the Senate has 22 standing committees, which handle legislative measures and prepare analyses and conduct hearings. Committee amendments are amendments made to a bill by the standing committee that is acting on the particular measure. Committee analysis, an analysis that's prepared by a legislative committee that's pending in an Assembly or Senate standing committee. Committee assignments. Each legislator in the Assembly and Senate are given assignments to serve on several committees throughout the legislative session. Committee bill is one authored by a majority of a committee, usually used for enacting non-controversial law changes. Committee chair or vice chair, the two leadership positions for each standing committee of the California legislature. Committee consultant refers to the professional staff who work for legislative committees. Committee deadline is the deadline for bills to pass their policy or fiscal committee. Committee of the whole is when the two houses of the legislature meet jointly or as an entire house. It's rarely used in the state of California. Committee staff are the professional non-elected individuals who work for individual committees of the California legislature. Companion bill is when two bills identical in wording are introduced in each house of the legislature. It's not often used in the California legislature. Concur or non-concur. To concur is when the House of Origin approves amendments made to a measure in the other house and the measure returns for a final vote. To non-concur is when the House of Origin refuses to approve the amendments made by the other house. Concurrent resolution is a resolution adopted by both houses of the legislature. A conferee is an appointed member of a conference committee. Conference committee is a two-house committee that includes an equal number of assembly members and senators, usually 3 from each house, that is comprised to resolve differences between the Senate and Assembly versions of a measure. It usually occurs after the House of Origin refuses to concur in amendments adopted by the other house. Conference report is the completed document as a result of a successful outcome of a conference committee. Confirmation, the state Senate is generally responsible for confirming gubernatorial appointees to their respective office. That is the constitutional obligation to advise and consent. Conflict, this term refers to when 2 or more bills would amend the same code section. A conflict of interest is when an elected or appointed official or their staff have a personal financial interest in an official matter coming before them. A conformity bill is a term used to describe a bill that conforms to federal or some other law. For example, conforming state tax law to federal tax law provisions. Consent, a measure is usually placed on the consent calendar when there's no registered opposition to a measure, and usually when no votes have been cast. Constituent is a citizen who lives in a designated legislative district and is a constituent of an assembly member or senator. Constitution is California's highest level of law that was adopted by the voters in 1879. Constitutional amendment is a proposed change to the California Constitution, either proposed by the legislature through an ACA or SCA, or by the people through an initiative. A constitutional officer or office is the 9 individually elected officials who are elected on a statewide basis. Consultant refers to the professional staff who work for a legislative committee or are legislative committee staff. Contingent enactment is when the enactment of a measure is made contingent upon a specified occurrence or the enactment of another measure. A continuing appropriation is a specified appropriation that is available for more than one fiscal year. A continuous appropriation is a constitutional or statutory expenditure authorization that is renewed each year without further legislative action required. Control sections are sections of the budget bill. For example, the 1.00. These are usually contained at the end of the budget bill itself, and they provide specific controls on the appropriations itemized in section 2.00 of the Budget Act itself. Convene is when a legislative committee or the floors of the Assembly or Senate begin their official proceedings. A corrections bill is a bill that simply makes code corrections. We also call it a code maintenance bill, perhaps a technical corrections bill. It's used to fix things like misspellings or incorrect cross references. A criminal penalty, when a law is violated, there may be a criminal penalty assessed for the violation of that law. Cross-reference is when a statute refers to another code section. For example, when a definition for a term references the definition for that word used in another code section. Current year budget is a term used in the budget process to designate the operations of the present fiscal year in contrast to past or future periods, as well as the fiscal or budget year. Custom and practice is a term used to describe the usually followed order established by precedent. Daily file, the Assembly and Senate publish a daily file that contains valuable information, including things like committee listings, committee hearings, the measures pending on the floors, etc. Daily history, the Senate and Assembly publish daily the official actions taken on legislative measures. Daily journal, the Senate and Assembly publish daily official proceedings, including floor actions and committee actions. A dead bill is when a bill has failed to move through the legislative process. A deadline is a procedural date specified for actions to occur, such as when policy committees must conclude their hearings. Debatable, when a motion is open to debate or discussion. Debt service is the amount of money required to pay interest on outstanding bonds and the principal of maturing bonds. Declaratory of existing law, this is a provision of a bill that provides that the legislature had intended this law change to apply retroactively to when the existing law was first adopted. Decorum, engaging in proper conduct in committee or on the floor. Deferral clause. A deferral clause is used when one bill defers to another bill concerning which provisions will actually take effect. The desk staff is a term used to describe the staff who work at the Assembly or Senate desks in their respective chambers. Defined term, a term in a bill or statute that has a definition in the bill or statute. Definition, a provision in a bill or statute that provides a definition for a term. Died in committee is when a measure failed passage or was not taken up and moved forward in the committee. Delegation of authority is the legal term describing when the legislative branch delegated some of its lawmaking authority to the executive branch of state government for rulemaking purposes. Desk is the area where the floor staff work in the Assembly and Senate chambers. Desk is clear, a statement normally used in the Senate at the end of a floor session to announce that all of that day's official business has been concluded. Digest, this refers to the Legislative Council's digest, which provides an objective, brief explanation of existing law and what a bill proposes to change an existing law. The digest keys, at the end of the Legislative Council's digest, there are 4 keys for each bill. Vote, meaning the vote threshold required for its passage. Appropriation, whether the bill appropriates funds. Fiscal committee, whether the bill is to be re-referred to the appropriations committee. And local program, meaning whether this bill would result in a state mandated local program. Digesting occurs when an attorney at the Office of Legislative Counsel drafts the Legislative Council's digest for a measure. Dilatory, this is the use of parliamentary procedure to intentionally delay official legislative proceedings. Direct democracy, the 3 forms of political powers that are granted to the people of California under the state constitution, Article 2. They are initiative, referendum, and recall. District refers to the legislative district of an assembly member or senator. District bill, this is a measure that was introduced by a legislator for the benefit of his or her district, generally affecting only that particular legislative district. Disposition refers to the final action taken on a legislative measure. Dissent is to voice disagreement on a procedural matter or to speak against something. Divide the question is a procedural rule to break into two or more parts a motion or a vote, such as multiple confirmation votes on the Senate floor. DOF, or Department of Finance, or just finance. This is the State Department in the executive branch. That's the fiscal control agency. They prepare the state budget and advise the governor and state agencies on budget matters. Do pass is a motion to pass a legislative measure without any amendments. Do pass as amended is a motion to pass a legislative measure with an amendment or two. Double jointing refers to language added to a bill that makes its passage contingent upon another bill's passage to avoid one bill chaptering out the other bill. Dropped bill is when the bill's author chooses not to proceed with his or her bill. Dual referral or a double referral. This refers to when a measure has been referred to two policy committees by the Assembly or Senate Rules Committee.